Alright everyone, here's just a cautionary sort of message for people with regards to Hurricane Florence, based on, one of the things that I do for a living is keeping up with the news. Most of the news, unfortunately, is quite worrisome with regards to Florence. If you are in the path of the storm, which is basically halfway up the South Carolina coast to the southern coast of Virginia, you should leave the area, definitely. And also, there's actually another bit of cautionary advice that a lot of people are not actually saying right now, but I've lived it firsthand. When, for instance, Hurricane Irene, years ago, this is almost, I think, 7 years ago at this point, came through our area. It had been depleted to the point where it was a weak tropical depression at the time, so you'd think, well, not as much wind, not as much of a problem. The problem is that in areas where you've got a lot of mountains and hills, all that water gets funneled down into the valleys. If you are in a valley between two layers of mountain, if you're in parts of certainly southwest Virginia or parts of the western side of the Carolinas where you've got a lot of mountains, even parts at this point I think of northeast Georgia are in the line of the storm. If you've got an area with a lot of hills and mountains and you're in a small valley next to a creek, that creek can go from 2 feet to 20 feet fairly easily during one of these events. It happened here. So much of this state's infrastructure was damaged or destroyed during Hurricane Irene. There was a dead body that was found like 200 yards up behind my neighborhood through the woods where I usually go walking. Like literally when I made the video, the second day of Irene, when the remnant part of the storm was just starting to begin to deplete itself, I made a video up there in the woods of basically the service road that goes up to the water area and the and past the electric company. It had been completely blasted out. Now normally this little creek is a foot deep in most places. In some places it gets to 1.5 feet. It's little, it's like 10 feet wide. I trudge up and down it all the time. There's lots of wildflowers, there's mushrooms, there's ferns, there's all sorts of cool stuff. And it's sort of like you're in the reeds. You can pretend that you're sort of on a safari or something. It's fun to do. It's entertaining. The water's fairly warm, like abnormally warm for some reason, even in the cold months. There are spots up there that never freeze. I'm not sure why. It must be some swamp gas or some... It's probably a volcano. It's going to erupt and kill me. But that creek was at least 8 feet deep and surged right through the road. I didn't want to get too close to the edge. And there was a dead body literally washed up along this same river, again, maybe 200 yards through the woods up some hills. I've actually walked around the area where it was found, so do not underestimate your little local creek. Or even like there's a lake there. Well, that lake level may rise fairly quickly, inundating its shore. It could cause damage to piers, certainly will cause damage to boats on inland craft that are on lakes and ponds and stuff. Make sure those are stored. And again, if there's no water where you are, Bud Light is a temporary substitute. You might want some Ziploc bags because if there's no plumbing... Now, one thing that people say is fill up your bathtub, like clean it out. If you're going to use it for drinking water, scrub it really well and fill it, keep it filled. Otherwise, usually when you're filling your bathtub, the idea is to be able to flush your toilet. You can open up the back, pour water in it, the pressure changes, it'll actually flush. So in a pinch, it'll work for some time. It's not as good, but it will work. You'll need a couple gallon jugs. You just pour them in at the same time, or a nice 2 or 3 gallon bucket. You'll get the flush. You can take a shit and not worry about it building up. Otherwise, literally just shit in a Ziploc bag if you have to. You're going to want a pack of wet wipes, those things for toddlers. They actually work really well even when you're older. Like, it can be a helpful thing. And then you dispose of it, you bury it or whatever. That's what I would recommend. Remember that flood water is not potable. You must not drink it. And this can cause problems. 200 or 300 miles inland, you could see people die because of the storm. And always, anytime there's such a thing, somebody's going to be dumb and say, well, I really need to get home. Well, I really need to get to work. The water on this road doesn't look that deep. And as the weather sites have pointed out, hey, in that spot, there might not be a road below the murky water that you're looking at. You're just seeing the surface. You may not realize there could be a 10-foot chasm below it that the water has already blasted out. It's surging on through so quickly, you're not going to have a chance to say goodbye, basically, or pray to Jesus. You will be quite dead very quickly. So don't try to ford through the water. Not a good idea. So there's a little bit of a cautionary thing. Hopefully, I mean, under the best circumstance, the storm starts tracking north, stays out in the Atlantic, and magically misses the U.S. altogether. The odds are quickly shrinking that that will happen. Or it goes south into the Caribbean somewhere, stalls out there, rains itself out over open water, and doesn't even touch the land. Unfortunately, an increasing number of these tracks have the storm idling offshore and drenching the first 50 to 100 miles of the Carolinas, then slowly tacking in, destroying everything within its path. Again, if you are in an area where you're in a valley sandwiched between a couple mountain chains and you've got a lakeside home or a streamside home, you're probably in more danger than someone who's a couple blocks away from the shore on the ocean at this point. We saw that as much damage was done here by Irene as when Irene first made landfall in some cases. It was a massive amount of damage, and there were lives lost. And think, this is Vermont. We're several hundred miles from the ocean in the easterly direction. The storm had already gone across the whole Appalachian chain, the whole spine of the mountains there, and still smashed into us like a sledgehammer. So people that are well inland, you don't need to be on the shore. You don't need to be at Cape Fear right next to the Brunswick nuclear plant to be worried right now. You should probably still be preparing if you're anywhere along those mountains. If you're out in a flat area, not as much danger, unless, again, you're right next to a river. The flooding tends to be a little bit less, more expansive, but maybe less deep, as opposed to when, 99% of the water is quickly funneled down into 1% of the land area. You can imagine you can have a problem. Hell, you can have flooding problems even just during a bad thunderstorm under such situations. Not so much if you're in nice flat Florida. I know because I was actually there in Tampa. That's about all. Peace out.